Welcome to Falling into 40 with Bailey and Jessica.
Welcome back to Falling into 40 with Bailey and Jessica. We are here today. We hope you are listening with us and that you have been listening. And if not, catch up. We've talked about several different things that have been kind of deep and things that are also just going on in the world. And we think they're important. You know, if you need to look back on some of our episodes to see what those things are so you can have those conversations with your kids, your loved ones, stuff like that, be sure and go back. But I think today, as we are falling into 40, we will just kind of talk about how the last decade, the last 15 years, we've talked about what we would say to ourselves if we could go back. And we want to go ahead and talk about what we think we should say to ourselves now if we were to go in the future 10 or 15 years so that we don't have to have the same conversation on what we would like to say to ourselves.
I think we talked about it very early on. That was a question we had for one another was if you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would it be? And in thinking on that, there's a lot of things that if I could go back and tell myself what I know now, I would do so. But looking forward to the future, there's this fear of getting older. I've read in some things calling it like 40 phobia. So just not being afraid of aging and growing older, I think is something that I want to move forward and not be so worried all the time about it. But what do you think, Jessica? What would you tell yourself if you could glimpse into the future? You're about to turn 50. What would you tell yourself?
Well, first, I think I should be honest and say that as my birthday is almost a month away and I will be 40, that I am having a hard time with it. And, you hear people say, oh, that is so silly. That's absolutely insanity. You're so young, or 40's the new 30. There's all kinds of things that you hear, but it's the truth. And I can honestly say it's a weird feeling. And I don't know, I don't dread it. It's just strange. I feel like I'm getting older and maybe there is a little bit of that fear. But I think one of the things that many women struggle with, if I were turning 50 and I was looking back on this chapter, this season right now, I would say learn to give yourself a little bit more grace. And I think that's so cliche, and it's easy for me to tell you that, Bailey. Oh, Bailey, you are being too hard on yourself. And I really, truly feel that if I'm telling you that, but It's really hard to apply that to myself. And I don't know why that is, but that's not being real because I'm not perfect. And so I need to learn to get better about that.
We are our own worst critics for sure.
And that's kind of something hard to overcome, I think. You and I are alike, as I assume a lot of women are. At the end of the day, you're thinking of all of the things that you didn't get done, that didn't even get close to even entering your brain because you were too focused on a few of the other things. And I think instead of focusing on that, maybe celebrating at the end of the day what I did get done, even if it was just one thing, whatever it was.
Yes, how far you've come versus I haven't gone very far. I haven't done very much today. Looking back, you accomplished something. And I am the worst at that. And I'm glad you brought that up because I start each day or even the night before each night thinking about what I need to do, the the boxes I need to check off of my list. And at the end of the day, if I don't get that done, I sometimes feel like I've failed myself or I've failed my family or something like that. And so just knowing that you're not a superwoman, you can't do every little thing. And sometimes you have the best of intentions when you start your day, but stuff happens and stuff gets in the way. And, being okay with the small things or getting the small things done. Or if you take time for yourself, that's okay too. And sometimes I feel guilty if I took time for myself that day instead of getting XYZ done. And so I'll be like, well, I shouldn't have done that. I should have gotten these tasks completed. And so then you start being hypercritical of yourself, and it's very unhealthy. And I think if we want to be healthy at that age in the future, we've got to learn how to do those things and not be so critical of ourselves.
And for me, I find a hard time balancing being present with my family, my kids. So I'll make a goal, I'm going to be more present, and I'll do that. And then I'll have something that I needed to get done or organized. And all of a sudden I feel like a scatterbrain because I was focused on, like, I've got to balance better. And that's a really
Mm-hmm.
hard thing for me to do. I hate being the one that shows up for something and am disorganized with it. And that's kind of how I am by nature. But I really don't like it when it feels like I could have gotten it done, but I chose to do something else. And that's knowing that my family comes first. It's still this
Right.
this little cloud hovering right here. And it is unhealthy. And it's something that's a personal thing that I'm gonna have to work through.
Yes. And at the end of the day, too, 10 years from now, think about the ages your kids will be. And so I know, and that's hard to swallow and that's hard to think about, but in this 10 years, will you get to that point and look back and say, I did all these things, I checked all these boxes, or would you rather look back and say, I was present for my people, I was present for my kids? And at the end of the day, which one is more important? And so just making sure, we prioritize that, I think is so important as well.
I think that that's a really good way to look at it. And just to remember that it is, yeah, we never know when our last day is anyway, whether we're going to make it to 50 or tomorrow or to 90, whatever it
Right.
is. And so, making memories and being there through the good times and the bad. And I think that is important. And I think that that's something that at every age or season we have to keep coming back to, because we live
Yes.
in that society where we're over busy, we over everything.
We say yes to everything. And then once we say yes to it, then it creates a system of madness where you have to stay on top of things. And yeah, it's a divide and conquer
And then
lifestyle.
I think that you can get used to that
Mm-hmm.
chaos, living in that constant chaos. And
Mm-hmm.
so when things are calm, you're like, okay, well, what I should be doing something. You don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
rest, and you can't rest well. Throughout the Bible, God talks about grace, and God's grace is usually defined as undeserved favor. It can't be earned, and it's something that is freely given. We count on God's grace and the bridge he built in our relationship with him. So God gives us this grace all day long. And thank goodness for that. But if he can give it to us, we need to be able to quit being so hard on ourselves, because he loves us that much that That's the reason that he sent his son to die on the cross for us. So that we didn't have to carry everything all the time. I think it's just remembering that perfection isn't a reality. It's not going to happen. I'm most likely never going to finish that list every single day because there's so many things on it, which also means that, Bailey, maybe I need to go edit that list. I think too, the times that you need grace the most are probably the times that you're least likely to bestow it upon yourself. You might have friends telling you or family members telling you, you know, you need give yourself a little grace. It's okay. But in the back of your mind, you're listening to that little voice saying, well, you're not up to par. You know, you should have gotten it done. You knew that this was coming, but we're not perfect.
No.
We need to learn to do better with grace.
Absolutely. And speaking of grace, just you brought up God's grace and God's love, and I just honestly, as we get so busy and in the shuffle, I start to neglect my quiet time where I can spend time in the word, where I can spend time, in a devotion or something like that. And we start to get so busy that we put some of those important times aside, just a quiet spiritual time. And typically at the beginning of a school year, in the summer, during a more calm time, I am really good about having that spiritual one-on-one time with the Lord, or that quiet time, or doing a devotional or something like that. But then as things get busy, though, that priority, which should be number one and shouldn't be put aside, starts to get put aside as well. And so, again, nothing should be prioritized over that. But I feel like that's something that, for me, honestly, that time is not made enough of.
Well, that's well put. And I think, the key to living successfully in God's grace and giving that grace to ourselves is realigning every single day by opening his word. And how pitiful that's the thing that gets pushed to the wayside so often.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people that isn't a struggle, but I've had seasons where it hasn't been a struggle and seasons where it has been a struggle. And so I just have to remember that I have to feed that spiritual side on a regular, or I am going to be in this constant chaotic state where I feel like I've got so much to do and I'm never going to get it done. Feeling like I'm should be able to do it all, but in reality, I can't.
And honestly, if we did truly take that time and devote it, maybe our outlook on that would be very different. Maybe the chaos and that struggle with doing so much could be calmed a little bit, basically by starting each morning that way. And so, looking down the road and in 10 years, I just want to tell myself, spend more time in the words. Take the time every day, no matter what time it is, whether it's morning, whether it's mid-afternoon, whether it's right before you go to bed, and spend some time in the word, and making sure that that part is aligned with your life, and that you're that one-on-one time with the Lord. I think that is so important.
It is. And really, in today's world, it's vital for our well-being.
I have a question for
Okay.
you. Talking about grace and getting to wrapped up in the chaos and busy, and things happen. Sometimes mistakes are made. I find it truly difficult. I don't know about you. Do you find it difficult to let things go?
Okay. So this is probably a silly example, but I do the lawn. I like to do the lawn. It's like a place of therapy for me. I mean, I like to mow. I'm out there on the riding lawnmower. I've got music going in my ears. I love seeing what it looks like when it's done. Well, the other day I was mowing and I was like trying to get as close as I could to this water valve without touching it so that I didn't have to go back and weed eat it around
Mm-hmm.
it. And the next thing I knew, there was water gushing everywhere. And I was like, oh no. So, and my boys and husband were out golfing. So I had one of those square like cement things that are decorated. You know, it had like a something on it. I don't know. And so I placed it over the
Gushing
shooting
water.
Yeah. I was just trying to think for a second, like, okay, well, that just created like a fountain that was going. So then I was rushing around like a crazy person. There's a little hole in the ground with the cover, and I picked it up and I tried to see if there was something in there I could turn. Anyway, I got to the alley and turned the water off and then went on my merry way mowing because there was nothing I could do about it at that moment.
Yes.
And so I did like 2 big strips in the backyard. And then I thought, I had my music pretty loud and I thought, well, that doesn't sound right.
I know.
Well, and so I thought, and I pulled the lever that engages the blade and it was like limp, it just like
Oh no.
just up and down. And I thought, oh no. First I thought the blade flew off.
Oh no.
But that didn't happen. So I broke the mower and I broke the water, and it was an easy fix on both. The mower part cost like $15 and it was here the next day, got fixed, and the water, my husband was able to cut off the part and just put a little cap on it and it was fine. But I kept saying, I am so sorry. I cannot believe I did that. I am so sorry. I really wasn't trying to hit that. I was doing everything I could not to hit it.
Right.
But I was so hard on myself. I felt like an idiot. And so I had a hard time letting that go. Maybe that's a silly example, but I feel like I let other people's, I'm like, whatever, no big deal. But when I do something, it's like, I don't know why I would expect that I could do all the things and not mess up ever. But anyway, what about you?
I have a lot of difficulty letting things go. I told you my story, but I backed into a pole not too long back and put a nice large dent in the back of my vehicle. And then did all the stuff to get it fixed. That's why you have car insurance. And come to find out, took it to get it fixed, and that door has to be ordered from the original manufacturer because they couldn't find a door. So now we have to wait till like July. And so, yes, I have beat myself up about it for over a month now, and nothing I can do about it. It was an accident. It happened. I didn't mean to do it, but it definitely wasn't great timing, and just little things or bigger things. I have a very difficult time just letting go of my mistakes and saying, okay, it's a mistake, move on. Because, we have that false sense that we need to be perfect all the time. And when we make mistakes, it eats us up. And so that's something that in 10 years that I can only hope I can grow out of.
Yes.
being so hard on myself all the time.
It kind of makes me want to ask myself, well, who do I think I am? Like, am I so pompous that I think that I'm never going to screw up,
I'm
Okay.
going to step away for just a second.
So while Bailey's not sitting over there, we'll have a solo podcast for a second. I think learning to give yourself grace and letting go of all of your past mistakes, having taken what you needed to from those things, those lessons, those mistakes, having learned from them, that's giving yourself grace. There's not a mistake that's too big for God. He can use every mistake that you've ever made for his glory and honor if you allow that. And I can vouch for that, saying, using my alcoholism. I think I probably mentioned this a lot. It probably gets on people's nerves, but it's truly my story and my testimony. And God has taken all of that shame and all of those mistakes that I made, and that the horrible feelings that I carried in my heart and in my mind. And he's taken those away, and he's allowed me to use my voice, and he's given me the courage to use my voice when it comes to talking about those things. And it does let me know that if I use those mistakes and allow God to work through them, then they weren't for nothing. They were for something. So I did find a quote, and it is, "Courage is grace under pressure." And that is by Ernest Hemingway. So I think that right now, as I enter the season, the new decade, being in my 40s, that I I take God's mercy and grace and let that give me hope for myself, for our world, and knowing that his grace is going to give me the strength for whatever I face, because there's nothing that's going to surprise God. He's already seen it all. It's already written out. He knows exactly how it's going to go. So I need to learn that all of these things that I'm making such a big deal in my head about, they're it's so unbelievably silly, and I've got to let that go so that I can enjoy the days that I have remaining left on this earth, whatever that may be. So I did a solo there, Bailey.
Awesome. Jessica,
Bailey.
what do you feel about change? Because I know now, and as I've gotten older, changes are very, very hard for me. Like I said, episodes before, I stayed in the same job for a long time just because of the fear of change, changing occupations, changing way of life, changing schedules. That's a very scary thing. And so looking into 10 years into the future, I know that changes are going to be happening. It's not avoidable that change is happening. So how do we cope and deal with change better in the future?
So, yeah, Bailey, it's a great question. I'm glad you threw that out there. So, I don't know. Change is hard. I think it's hard for a lot of people. I am a creature of habit, but I like change, even though it is hard sometimes. But the real kicker is I like that change when I want that change. I don't like change,
Oh,
so when change comes my way and I didn't ask for the change, that's a whole different story. It's like, well, I didn't ask for that. That's not cool. This isn't how I planned it out. This doesn't align with all the fun, great, wonderful, perfect things I've envisioned. And I think being able to get better at that, at accepting change, and, we're not even going to do that. Even if we are in the word and we're doing our best, we're still going to fail. And so when these changes hit us, I think we can handle them better if we are staying in God's word. I think that we'll be able to go with the flow better, but that doesn't mean that I might have a little temper tantrum about the change. And, I have to sit myself down like a adolescent and say, okay, Jessica, be rational. You can do this. Everybody can do this. It's going to be okay. And I think I just have to remember those things. And I want to remember that. I want to remember that in these years that are coming, not just for myself, but the changes that my kids are going to go through in those seasons, because that's hard, not being able to fix everything. It's not like putting a band-aid on a scraped knee anymore. There's probably going to be broken hearts at some point, and I'm going to have to give whoever broke their heart a little grace. But I just knowing that it's all part of life, and
Yeah.
the way we handle it and the way we respond is going to affect and mold our children into the way they see things and their outlook on things. And maybe not always, but at least we could be a good example of just trying to take a deep breath and saying, it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't for you. I'm just kidding. That's the one example I can think of that I don't know. I can't imagine seeing one of my boys
Yeah.
brokenhearted, but it's bound to happen at some point. So,
Well, the reason I bring them up is because they're a struggle that I know that even at 10 years from now, I'm going to still be working on for myself. And so change and things not being in my control are very, very difficult for me. And sometimes it's out of my control for a very good reason. And I get that later. And so I just often have to remind myself to be grateful in the peaks and be grateful in the valleys, because those valleys sometimes teach us valuable lessons about life. And we realize that they were important to the path that God has for our life. And so if we don't have those valleys, we can't fully appreciate the peaks when we get to the top. And so, it's difficult for me to let go and say, okay, God, you got this. I'm going to step back, even though this isn't my favorite and this isn't what I think I need to be doing or what I think needs to be happening. I'm going to step back and give you the will, because that's what I need to do. And that's very difficult for me. Very, very difficult for me. And so that's something that I know
Jesus,
as I grow
take
old.
the wheel, take it from these hands. Da, da, da.
Absolutely.
No, but really, I mean, it's hard.
Yes.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Take it.
I don't deserve to have the will.
I don't need it. Hide back into poles.
Yeah, I'm ramrodding over valves, just trying to band-aid it with a little cement thing.
Jesus, take that wheel.
Take that wheel, even if it's the lawn mowing wheel.
Especially the lawn mowing wheel.
Well, just so you know, I did mow again yesterday, and I did a beautiful job.
There you go.
Everything's
Did you put the checkerboard pattern?
No, I didn't. In fact, our neighbors are getting a barn built in their backyard, and there's these men out there welding, and I know they have to think, what a lunatic, because I'll be driving along, and if I see a patch I missed, I just like jet over to it. I don't, so it's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't care. I'm just happy to be out there driving the little tractor, not breaking water valves. And anyway, it was a successful mowing. But yes, we need to give ourselves grace, get in the word, and we need to do that now, because in 10 years, we don't want to look back and say, these are things that we would have told ourselves, because we already know what they are.
Oh, we've been on this for a while. I think we need a part 2 because we're only about halfway through what I thought we need to talk about, because obviously there's a lot of things that in 10 years we need to tell ourselves. So I think this is definitely going to call for a part 2 of this episode. So,
okay, come back and see us.
All right.
And listen in for part 2 on our Dear Me segment.
Yep. Dear me.
Dear me.
We would tell ourselves, dear me. We appreciate our listeners, and join us again next week for part 2. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in with us on today's episode of Falling into 40. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.